I think for me, probably the best thing to do is to start at the beginning. I was born in 1953. It was a good year, Doug. It was a good year. No, seriously, you have to start at the beginning. Because for you to understand where I've come from fully, you have to understand that my heritage, my history, started when I was born, because the first place my parents took me was to church. When that was the first time I left the house. I was born in my grandmother's, one of her spare rooms, and my grandparents were faithful churchgoers, and my parents were faithful churchgoers. And the first place I found myself as a little tiny baby was in church. And I stayed in church my entire life. When I was just probably less than a year old, my father went into the ministry. And so for the next 12 years, I was the preacher's kid. And sometimes that was a good thing. Sometimes it wasn't a good thing. I learned a lot of things about churches and how churches run the hard way, by being the brunt of a lot of things, and by, getting to do certain things by default because there was nobody else to do it. Who was going to sweep out the church this week? Well, nobody showed up, so I guess the preacher's kids get to go do it. My sister and I would go do it. And so, you learn a lot of things, and you don't learn everything sometimes that's good things about church and about pastoring. And so by the time my dad ran into some difficulties with some issues, he just finally threw up his hands when I was 13 and called it quits and said, I'm done with this. And I went, yes, we are getting out of this. And I was never so thrilled in my life as to be able to just go to church as just a normal member of a congregation. Not the pastor's kid. Not with the responsibility of everybody looking at you all the time. Not with having to know about the ins and the outs of people's lives and the nastiness that they threw at the pastor's wife. Because, I can give you history, of what my parents endured in pastoring in those 12 years that we pastored. And all of that together put me in a mindset of, I will never be involved in this again. I will never marry a preacher. I will never be a pastor's wife. Never. I'll be content to just go to church and live in what I call an ordinary life. And that worked pretty good. But I got about 16, less than 16, and this guy was in my life when I was 13 because he was in the youth group that, when we finally went to this particular church, there he was. I remember the first time I set eyes on him, I was not impressed. And 2 or 3 years went by, and one night, Sunday night, he sat down beside me. I thought, what do you want? He asked me out, and I thought it was a big joke. I thought he and some of the rest of the guys were going to try to pull a fast one on me or something, because I'm just this little, girl with the glasses on, the little glasses and all that kind of stuff, quiet and all that. But, little did I know, what was ahead of me. But anyway, 16 years old, not serving God. The thing about it that I want to tell you is that you can be raised in church all of your life and be as backslidden as anybody. The problem with being raised in church and being backslidden is the fact that you become so hardened to the things of God. I'm talking to somebody. You can become so hardened to the things of God. You can become so hardened to the Word. You can become so hardened to the moving of the Spirit that it doesn't faze you one bit. And so when the enemy presents you with opportunities to sin, it's a no-brainer. Why not go for it? Sure, it's no big deal till you get caught. When you get caught in it, then it becomes a big deal. And so I remember, where I'm 16, I'm pregnant, we get married, I have this child. At least I can say for myself that I was raised with such a sense of responsibility that I knew I had to do something with this child. I couldn't just fritter it away. So, I mean, I was a good mom, a good homemaker, good at all that kind of stuff. Probably more out of a determination to prove everybody else wrong than anything else. But, whatever motivation it took, at least my child and my husband benefited from that. But I remember just being so hardened by it. And, when we first got married, my dad was, because he had a call of God on his life, he couldn't just sit in the seat and do nothing. And so he became the Sunday school superintendent. And if you know anything about the Church of God, Sunday school was a big thing. And so he became the Sunday school superintendent of our church. It was a fairly large church, about 400 people. And I remember that, maybe I'm going to take this too long, honey, I'm not sure. But anyway, I remember that, there were people who obviously didn't take too long for it to become obvious what was going on, in my life. And people began to talk. Oh, church people. Sometimes there's no mercy from church people. Sometimes there's no grace, there's no compassion, there's no empathy, there's nothing but judgment. And that's all I felt like I got. They were cordial on one hand, but talked about you behind your back on the other. And I knew there was a lot of talk going on. Well, it came down to the place where somebody put some nasty note on the church bulletin board in the hallway about certain people that if they weren't removed from their position as Sunday school superintendent, there was going to be a call made to the state office that would take care of it. So the current pastor of that church, was a wonderful man, and I loved him, and I love him still. He's been in heaven a long time. But he came to us, and he told us that either we got up in front of the entire church and we apologized to the church, or he would have to ask us to leave. Now, maybe you don't know this, but I'm a very stubborn and hard-headed person. My husband got up on a Sunday night, and he did that. And as far as I was concerned, I'm going, what business is it of anybody else's? I haven't sinned against you. I sinned against myself, against the principles of God. It didn't have anything to do with you people. And yet, eventually, I knew I was pressured into getting up and saying something, and so I did. I got up and said something, but I tell you what, it created such a rock-hard heart in me because of those attitudes that I had to endure. I'm 17 years old. I've got a baby to raise. I got I'm married. Who do I know that's married at 17? Nobody. And I have this great pressure on me to make it work. And what do I need all that put on me? But I'm telling you what, the heart that was already slightly hardened to the things of God suddenly got very hard. Very hard. And so, time came and went. I went back to school for a year to college, and then from there I went to X-ray school, and it was a crazy kind of a schedule. It was an in-hospital program. And so I had lots of excuses not to go to church. Why do I want to go? I don't care. He didn't care. His mother cared. The only time he showed up at church was about twice a year there for a while because his mama asked him. I'm going, well, fine, she can ask him. And he'll go. But, I found myself I don't care. When he got back in fellowship with the Lord, I went, that's fine. Go for it. But for the next few years, it was hell on earth. Because I have a husband now who wants to serve God, and I do not. So I made his life miserable. Not intentionally, but just by the fact that I was not interested in what he was interested in. And we would fight tooth and nail. We would come at it, and he'd go, why can't you just do this? And why can't you just do that? And that old hard heart would just get even harder. And I just was like, am I not good enough for you anymore? That's how I felt. What's wrong? We found ourselves in the situation we found out. I wasn't there by myself. You seemed to like me pretty good back then. What's wrong with me now? And so, I had this great feeling that, no matter what I did, it wasn't going to be good enough. And after a while, the devil used that against me when I saw things happening in him and how he was growing in the things of God. And my feeling was that there's no way I'll ever catch up to where he's at. There's no way that I'll ever be what he needs me to be. And we've had a second child by this time, but life was not good. He's trying to serve God, and he's got a wife that doesn't care one lick about it. Not one. Now, eventually, I started going back to church because I knew a lot of people at church, and hey, I'm a little social butterfly sometimes, and that's fine. And they didn't ask me if I was in fellowship with God when they asked me to be the nursery director. I went, okay. If anybody who knew me very well, you'd know I wasn't, But so I became the nursery director and, all this kind of stuff. But I tell you what, little by little, God has a plan to harden even the hardest hearts. And when the day came, he knew we needed to leave that church and go to a Rhema church, a Spirit-filled church. I was not happy about it at all because I think I'd been there one time before, and I did not like it at all. I think I knew that there was going to be a demand put on me that nothing else had put on me up until now. It was easy in a church you've been in for many years to just listen, let it come in one ear and out the other, and just ignore things when the Spirit of God is moving. And it did. It really did. Just to ignore all those things. But there was something different about this church. And I did not want to go there. And I remember him telling me, in 2 weeks, we will leave this church that we've been in, and we'll be going full time to this other church, to this Rhema church. And he said, I'm going, and I'm taking my children with me, and you can do what you want. You don't have to go if you don't want. But I'm telling you, me and my children are going there. I tell you what, it's so wonderful to have a husband who will stand and not compromise. He knew he could lose, this marriage was already on the rocks. And he knew he could lose everything. And I don't think I'd ever told him before. When I talked when I did the Sunday morning service in California back in January, after church, he said, I never knew that. He didn't know that one of the biggest reasons I went to X-ray school to start with was, his mom had been left with 4 children to raise when his father was killed with very little, with like an 8th grade education. So I'm thinking, I won't ever want to be in that position. But the other one was, if I get tired enough of this or he gets tired enough of me, then I'll have a job, a profession I can fall back on to take care of me. And so, he put his foot down, and he was nice about it. He just said, I'm telling you, in 2 weeks, we're leaving this church, and you can either stay or you can go. Well, being the person at this time who's very conscious of what other people think, I went with him. Now, if you talk to that pastor who is now in heaven, if you talk to him, he would tell you that the first time he laid eyes on me and I laid eyes on him, he said, if looks could kill, I'd have been a dead man. And he's right. He would have, because I didn't want to be there. I didn't want anything to do with him. And yet he was kind of rough around the edges, just naturally speaking. He was a very blue-collar kind of guy who got born again and went to Rhema. But I'm telling you what, God used that man, as rough as he was in so many ways, to little by little chip away at the hard heart that I had managed so carefully to put in place. And so as things rocked along, people started talking about Rhema, going to, this one's going to go to Rhema, and that one's going to go to Rhema, and here I went, uh-oh. Uh-oh. No. You got a good job. We've got a house. We're not going anywhere. And so one day he came to me and he said, I feel like the Lord wants me to go to Rhema. He said, and here's the application. I've already filled it out. And there's one question on here that says, is your spouse in agreement with this? Because they didn't want people coming out there and splitting up families. And so he said, it's the last question that needs to be answered. He said, and I'm leaving it with you. You answer that. And then you put it in this envelope and you mail it. I don't even want to know what you answered on it. So I looked at that and pondered it for a while. And somehow, some way, I knew that this was the right thing to do. Not that I wanted to do it. I mean, I really wasn't even really serving God yet. And we're going to go off to Bible school? Are you kidding me? But, I marked on there, yes. And I mailed it. And I thought, well, it's going to take, weeks or maybe even months before that comes back. And I'll have time to get used to this idea and kind of deal with it and kind of figure out what I'm going to do about this. It was back in 10 days. And I was like, are you kidding? Wow. And I made a decision right then that, okay, all right, we'll do this. And I began to just open up to the things of God. It wasn't a lot. It wasn't like a huge throw open the door, God, here I am. Everything I have is yours. All that I am is yours. No, it was like you get a little bit. That's all you get. Just enough to get me out there with my husband, with my kids, him to do his thing. But yet somewhere in there, as we actually got to planning on this, and we went to Oklahoma to find a place to live, because I said, I'm not going out there unless I know where I'm going to live. I've heard all these stories about people just loading up the U-Haul and getting out there and finding some place to live when they got there. I'm not doing that. I've got 2 children. You're not going to do that to me. So we went out there, and May happened to be at the same time graduation was being held. And if you've ever heard Brother Hagin's prophecy about tramp, 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 I hear the sound of feet. We were there when that was given. It was amazing. Now I look back and go, oh, God, that was such an awesome thing. Now that I see what it was, how important it was to be there. But somehow in me, I knew, okay, I have rededicated my life to the Lord, but there's something missing. And so I decided, my little Pentecostal background, to get baptized in the Holy Ghost, just hang on, turn loose, yield, whatever, and people never knew how they got the baptism. They just didn't. But I had been hearing this Rhema guy tell me it's a gift. And all you have to do is ask for it and believe you receive it and it's there. And I went, it can't be that easy. I was raised in an environment where it was never that easy. You have to be saved, sanctified for 30 years, and then get baptized in the Holy Ghost. And that's how this works. You got to seek God for anywhere from 5 to 10 years at least. Come on. And so, I remember on the way back home from Oklahoma, in the middle of the night, because it was like a weekend trip. We drove it straight through and straight back, once we found a place to live. And Sunday, I don't know, it wasn't Sunday night, it was Saturday night. Saturday night, somewhere about, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm driving the back roads of Mississippi, and he's sleeping. And I just said, you know what, I can't do this. I got to have more. I got to have more. And I said to the Lord, I said, okay, they say it's this easy. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to believe that I receive, and then I'm going to speak in tongues. And somewhere in Mississippi, in the middle of the night, I got baptized in the Holy Ghost in a car with a sleeping husband. And so, I still was reluctant. And yet I could, God started moving. When you've got a home, you've just been in it a couple of years and you don't want to sell it because you don't know what you're going to be doing afterwards. You got to have somebody to rent it. And we turned down renters right and left. And the day before we were to pack up all of our stuff, the right person came along to rent the house. So I'm seeing God work. And we got out there, and I just couldn't imagine going someplace like that, 1,100 miles away from my family, from my mama and my daddy, and I'd never lived away from them. And I got out there and found out, I like this. My mama called me up after 2 weeks and said, "You haven't called." I said, "Oh, I've been busy." And I had been, but I hadn't missed them. Best time of my life, being out there, because I began to depend on God and on my own husband instead of on my parents. It was something that had been missing in our marriage all those years, and we'd been married 9 years already. Had found that was a missing part, that had been just, never really addressed. And so, while we were out there, God just supernaturally moved, just so many times. I mean, there were times when we were down to, well, the bank we were using at the time, if you got down to zero, they shut your account. So I made sure that we never got below 1 cent. And there were times when it got down to 1 cent. And there were times when there was nothing in the cabinet to eat, and payday was a day or two away. And yet God always provided. He was showing me. He was showing me back then that when he asks you to do something, he'll provide the way. And you just have to trust him, no matter how it looks. No matter how it looks. And so I had a job that I dearly loved. They loved me. I didn't want to come home. Great, we'll be here another year. And in the spring of 1980, he says, we're going home. I'm going, why? He's looking at me like, good Lord, woman, I had to pray you out here. Do I have to pray you home too? And so I don't want to go home. What are we going to do? I don't know. Well, then why are we going? Because God said go. All right. My people, my coworkers at work said, can't you just send him home without you? And I'm going, well, probably not a good idea. So we came home, and I remember him coming over here, that first Thursday, and I'm going, well, we got to have some income. So, it'd be a few bucks of some kind because I need to find a job. And if he's going to minister out, we got to have our steady income somewhere. So I need to be looking for a job. And then, it kind of kept going Thursday and Sunday, Thursday, Sunday, Thursday, Sunday, Thursday, Sunday. He comes to me in the kitchen one day and he said, okay, they really want us to move over there to High Springs, Fort White area. What do you think? And I went, no, I don't think that's God. And right here I went, pack your bags. Get the boxes back out, pack the bags, So we did. We packed up and we came. But, I told him when we left to go to Rhema, I said, you just promise me. You promise me. You promise me you will never pastor. And he goes, that's fine. I'm not called to pastor. And I said, great. Then I can do this. Because I figured, I could just stay in the background. You can go do your thing. I know traveling ministers, they go out on the road. They're by themselves. They can go do their thing. And mama and the babies can stay at home, just, under the radar, so to speak. So he promised me. And then we started this thing over here. And I'm just going, okay, all right, well, this is temporary. This is temporary. Let me just stay in the background. But you know what I have found out? I found out that honestly, from the day I was born, God had me in training for this all my life. Much as I didn't want to see it, much as I didn't want to admit it, as much as I said I didn't want to have anything to do with it, God had been training me for life in ministry, and I didn't even realize it. And so, time takes its, God is so good. Just one step at a time. That's all I could handle. Just one step at a time. So for those early days, it was just a matter of stepping back and staying in the background and doing whatever he needs and leaving it at that and let everybody else do anything and just leave me out of it. But God has a way, of just moving you a little bit and a little bit and a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. And yet there was still always a fear in me that I still couldn't ever catch up to where he was. And there have been times in these 40 years, in that early decade, where I have thought, the best thing for me to do would be to let him pastor and just me go do something else. Just get out of his life. He'd be better off. But you know what? God's got other plans. And I've come to understand that, I was 16 when I got pregnant and we got married. I had another year of high school to go. I would have been third in a class of 600. Now, I didn't have any real plans for what I wanted to do with my life. Not many 16-year-olds really do. I didn't have a real plan for that. But I became bitter over the years that my opportunities to do what I wanted to do with my life had been taken from me. And you know what? I had to deal with that over the years. Had to deal with getting rid of that kind of stuff, those kind of attitudes. And I've come back, to Jeremiah 29, where the Lord says, I know the plans I have for you. Plans to give you an expected end or a future and a hope. I had no idea what kind of a future God had in store for me. Had no hope for something that was really going to be anything other than hard. I remember telling my mother when she found out we were going to Bible school, she said, I just feel so bad for the kids. If it was just you and Edwin, it'd be one thing. But think about the kids. I said, Mama, it won't be like you experienced. It won't. And I was saying that by faith because honestly, I didn't know if it was going to be different or not. I honestly didn't. But we had to put a good face forward here. We had to put something in there. I had just enough of the word in me to say it won't be the same. There's a lot of things over the years, that God's talked to me about that I have been reluctant to do, afraid to do, felt inadequate to do, felt totally uncalled in a particular area, and yet God has little by little brought me to where I am today. And it's really a matter of deciding that God always has a good plan. And along the way, if I could tell somebody who's single anything, I would say every decision you make along the way might be the one thing that changes your direction. Don't ever look at a decision you make as it's too small to matter. It's not. It's not. It's not too small to matter. We kind of tend to think of the places in life, the points in life that are turning points, that they're big. Sometimes they're very minor. They look like they're very minor, but they will impact your life. Don't hang around people that you've got no business hanging around with. Don't start relationships you've got no business in a relationship with. I said this in January. I said, I don't know that we were meant for each other, but somehow God put us together and He's made it work. I don't know if we would have eventually, if we hadn't been in sin, if God would have been able to put us together as a couple and lead us in a more direct path to the ministry He had for us. But I'm glad that he managed to do it at some point anyway. But I know this. I was talking Wednesday night about restoration. And I can tell you that even though there were times when I thought I had lost, my future, I had lost sight of anything I might have wanted to do, what I think I should have done, I'm here to tell you, God restored everything that I thought I needed or wanted out of life. I had no idea what I wanted. If I had not been in a place of anger and bitterness about the way church people acted, God could have talked to me sooner. And maybe I would have responded sooner. But even then, it took a detour. Life took a detour. But today I look back and I say, would I give up either one of my kids for that? Know that detour was, not, I love my boys, and so I can't imagine life without them. It's not ideal to start out at 16 as a mom, but I wouldn't take anything for either one of them. But I'm just saying, God can restore and bring you back to the place He wants you to be. But I'm telling you what, it's so important that I don't care what age you are, to not dismiss the things that God has put in your heart. Sometimes it's just a little nudge. Sometimes it's just a little urge. Sometimes it's just a little glimpse of what He wants you to do, what the next thing is. Follow it. Follow it. Because God's got bigger plans for you than you know. I look back and I'm just so grateful for the people that have been in my life along the way, who've been blessings and encouragement and just put up with me, in some instances, while I found my footing. And even after being here, the first, I don't know, gracious, how long was it? 20 years? For the first 20 years, you wouldn't see much of me except in the background. Some people it takes them a while to get it, and I'm one of them. And I just want you to know that it's important that you say yes to God. Whatever it is, how small it is, say yes. Because your yes to the small thing leads to a bigger opportunity to say yes later. You won't get those bigger opportunities if you don't say yes to the small ones. You will not find yourself in a place where you're positioned where you're supposed to be if you don't say yes. And I could meddle here a lot, because I see things, that people are missing right and left. Because I recognize it. Because I was so hard-headed, so determined to do it my own way, so determined not to have anybody tell me what to do, for somebody else to control my life and my destiny. And I found out that God has brought me to a place that is so much bigger than I could ever have imagined. Left to myself, I would have been satisfied with being a housewife and a mom and living in a little subdivision in Jacksonville with somebody 20 feet on the other side of me and just going along with life and going to church when I felt like it and getting involved to the extent that I felt like it and not really ever finding out the good things that God had for me. But if you're raised in a place where you don't know that good comes from God all the time, that nothing bad ever comes from the Father's hand, you will accept certain things. And I had learned to accept certain things. But thank God I had a husband who had enough in him to put his foot down to a very stubborn wife and just say, you do what you please. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And just because I didn't want people to think badly of me as I went along with it. And in the going along, God got a hold of me. Make a determination. Make a determination to follow God's plan. He's got the best plan. I promise you, you will not regret it. I promise you, it will turn out better than you ever expected. I look at the circle of friends that I had at one time, small group of friends. And today I look at the circle of friends I've had that are all over the world. Who would have thought some little country girl born in Newberry, Florida, who went to school barefoot, who didn't know much, couldn't talk to anybody, would know as many people as I know that now. And being blessed with as many relationships as we have with other ministers now, to be as satisfied and as fulfilled as I am now. You'll never know that unless you surrender to the things of God. You'll never know that unless you completely, 100% say yes when He asks you to do something. To say yes when He said, why don't you just try this? See, God knows me well enough to say, instead of telling me to do something, He'll say, why don't you just try this? Why don't you just try it? You ever had somebody get you to try okra? Why don't you just try it? I still don't like it. But there are some times when you try it, you find out, yes, this is exactly what I was looking for. And see, it's not about just you and me. It's about the plan of God. God's got a plan. And the plan he has for your life is not just about you. It's about the people that he will use you to influence. It's about the people he will use you to change their lives. It's about the people he will use you to reach that nobody else can reach. It's about everybody, including you. Including you. So, honey, I'm sorry I took so long. And I'm sure there's more I could say, but is that enough? Hallelujah. Life is interesting. We all make mistakes. But I'm here to tell you, God can redeem the mistakes. God can restore the time lost. He can make something out of it that you never thought it was possible. If you ever get to a place where you feel like you've messed it up so bad, God, it's like unscrambling eggs. It's not possible. God made the egg. If he wants to unscramble it, he can do it. But you know what the best solution is to not make the mess to start with. For us to follow his plan and knowing his heart, to follow him as closely as we can, to be as diligent, to work at hearing his voice and to obeying his voice. And when something comes up and you miss it, just say, Lord, I'm sorry, and just go on. And just go on and not let the devil beat you up about mistakes of the past. I mean, I don't talk about the way we got married and stuff as something to be emulated for sure, or to be excused. It's not. But I'm just telling you, God redeemed those mistakes. And he can redeem any mistake you make. But the best thing is just to make a determination in your heart to not make them, not willingly. See, there were times when I just said, no, I don't want to. When God would ask me to do certain things, I would say, I don't want to. But rebellion can cost you big. There are times, you'll say no to God for a lot of different reasons, but one of them you have to understand is rebellion. And when you get into a place of rebellion against what God has told you to, and you know better, there's a high price that comes with rebellion. A high price. And sometimes it's not just in your life, but in the life of those you love that you'll see that. I see people, and I've known people over the years, that their rebellion showed up in their children. Showed up in their children when they were grown. They're not serving God. I can name several families from almost 40 years ago who decided not to serve God. They had their own ideas of how things should be done, and they weren't going to listen to anything else. And so they rebelled against what God was doing, and today their children do not serve him. Do you think if they could go back and undo those kind of decisions that they would? Yeah. So I'm just telling you, when you tell God, I don't want to, or you just dismiss it out of hand because you don't want to, you better stop and think. Is that a price worth paying? Is that a price worth paying? It may not always be easy, but God never asks us to do anything that will create loss in our lives. He's always, always, always asking us to do things that's going to add to our lives and add to our influence and add to our ability to preach and to minister to somebody else. So remember, God's not a God of subtraction. He's always a God of addition, but better than that, he's a God of multiplication. Amen. So I don't know if that helps you. Is that okay? I don't know if that helps you tonight or not. But it pays to hear some of the other side of things sometimes, because you can look at somebody in the pulpit and you think, oh, you've had it easy all your life. And I'm going, I had somebody tell me that just last week. Oh, well, your life is always just so good. And I'm going, You have no idea what my life has been. You have no idea what it's taken to get to where I'm at today. You don't know me well enough anymore to know what that's all about. But listen, God's got a plan. And the best thing you can do is to say, God, whatever your plan is, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go with the plan. You show me the plan, man, I will do it. Whatever, one step at a time or two steps or whatever. But I just know that God knows each and every one of us individually well enough that he knows how to get through to us. He knows how much he can share with us that we can handle. And he knows that if he can get a hold of you and get you to say yes just one time, he'll show you that his grace is there to take you to the next step. There's ability in you. He wouldn't ask you to do something that you didn't have the ability to do. He's already put it in you if he's asked you to do something for him. And you just have to depend on him to pull it out of you and to put it on display and see yourself walking in the plan that God has for you, remembering that it's not just about you.